Hey folks, Techniverse here, and welcome to WOT the HELL, where we go over some of the biggest changes they made to the show from the books, and today we are talking episode 1. Now, I will warn you, this is going to be a little spoiler heavy, so if you haven't seen it yet, go and watch the show, and then come back. If, however, you have read the books, you're planning on watching the story, but you're curious about some of the differences, this is the place for you, because we're going to point out some of the things that not only really confused me, but kind of I didn't see the point to. So there was also some things that I think they changed that made a very, very big difference in subtle ways that I think are going to end up playing out very, very well in the long run. So let's jump right into it on What the Hell. Alright, first off, let's take a minute to talk about this chick. Could they have picked a more bitchy looking lady? This lady is spot on for not really what I visualized for Oladia, but seeing her on the screen and the presence that she holds, I think they picked a brilliant actor for this. Now, this lady is very, very severe, and her jawline is no fucking joke, okay? I'm very curious to see where this goes. And one of the things that I love about Oladia is the fact that it is very, very much an ironic joke. So the thing is, you go through most of the story, and this is a spoiler, so be warned, you go through most of the story thinking that she is a dark fiend, a dark friend, and one of the people in charge, maybe even a close puppet of one of the Forsaken, but you end up finding out in the end that she really has no idea what's going on. She's just an idiot. So brilliant, brilliant casting. She is an epic level C-word, and I'm going to leave you to judge on how you feel about that, but we've seen a little bit more of her in one of the more recent episodes, and you really get the idea that her character is just totally super anti-masculinity and super, yeah, I mean, she's a red. What more do I need to say? She is the red. She ends up defining the terms of the reds going forward, and in fact, we'll touch on this a little bit more in the episode 4 video, but there is a point when one of the other Aes Sedai come to her and remind her that, hey, you're supposed to be the one upholding our laws, not trying to change them, and it has a little bit to do with gentling Logain. We'll touch more on that in a little bit later. The other thing I'm going to jump on into now is, of course, the river scene. Now, the river scene was not in the books, to my recollection. Maybe I missed it. I don't see how I could have. I have read the damn things 3 times. But this is a great analogy for Saidin and Saidar, because the female part of the power is just like a river, and in fact, in one of the next episodes, and we'll touch on this a little bit more, Moiraine even tells her that the power is like a river. You can fight it and it will drown you, or you can float on it and let it take you. So men have to control the power and wrestle it and force it to do their will. Women have to surrender to it and kind of control it that way. It's kind of an oxymoron saying they can control it by surrendering to it, but that really is how women control the power. They give into it and accept and allow it to flow through them. Men kind of force it to their will, and that's one of the 2 major differences. So the reason I'm bringing up the river scene is because you can see in the beginning she is very much struggling here against the current, okay? And that is symbolizing her powerlessness, that is symbolizing her future, that is symbolizing her fate, and she is fighting against it. Eventually, she decides to relax, and she floats up to the top and catches her breath and just kind of goes with the flow, and that is the only way. I don't know if you guys are into philosophy at all, but there is a speaker I'm very fond of. His name was Alan Watts, and he talks a lot about how if the river takes you, swimming against the current will only make sure that you get tired and most likely drown, but if you swim with the current, you can usually make it to shore. And this is a life model that I choose to live by. I tend to not let anything weigh me down too much, because you can't really change things that have already happened. But very, very good visual analogy and opening to her character to basically her whole story is opening up and accepting and learning to control this power and accepting her destiny and her fate, which actually ends up being quite tragic. If you don't know the story, I won't get too into it, but she is a central character. She becomes very powerful, and this is a great way to start her journey, and I think very well visually represented what Moiraine talks about in a later episode about giving into the power and surrendering to it. Alright, and real quickly while we're talking about Egwene, I noticed something that I'm curious if it's going to become a regular thing. So take a look at this picture that I'm putting up on the screen here, and as you can see, she's laying there holding her braid. Now, fans of the books know that Nynaeve has a bad habit of tugging on her braid when she's frustrated. However, that seemed like a very childish thing, and since she's supposed to be a little bit older, I'm curious if they passed that trait to Egwene, because Egwene just got her braid, and now she's holding it like she's proud of it, and this is the only time I've seen either one of them really play with their hair. So if you see braid tugging in the future, I'm willing to bet that it comes from Egwene and not Nynaeve, just because her character's a little bit younger, she just got the braid, and it kind of fits her better in this little cinematic setup that they've got. So we're going to move on from this. I just wanted to point it out. It's one of those things that if you read the books, you'll notice subtle things like this, and if you don't, you really don't care. She's just pulling her hair. But her character is not the one that's supposed to be tugging on her braid. We'll see what happens. So the next thing I wanted to touch on in the first episode, the wolves, man. Wolves are everywhere. They did a great job of foreshadowing all of the interactions that he's had with the wolves so far, and in fact, as far back as this very episode, the first time you see Rand al'Thor, he is drawing a bow, and you hear a wolf howling in the background. He then gets to talk to Tam, who is right next to him, and he says that the wolves have been getting really bold and closer to town lately. Now, anybody who knows the story of Perrin knows that this is foreshadowing of his future and how he becomes Golden Eyes, and very, very interesting detail. I like that they put this in the beginning, because in the books, one of the things that I felt was that his transformation was the least explained and the most sudden. He kind of meets Elias at just the right time, but starts to turn, and there's really no hinting at it or alluding to it. It just happens. So this is great foreshadowing. This is epic storytelling to drop little hints like this in the couple episodes before you actually see that he can talk to the wolves. Very, very, very well done, and a subtle nod to the fact that even though it wasn't written exactly that way, there are some things that need to be changed in order to flush out these stories a little bit. You got to remember that Robert Jordan, when he wrote this story, was not an author. He wrote this for himself. His wife Harriet convinced him to publish it because she happened to be an editor and a publisher at the time, and thank God that she did, because we've gotten such an epic, amazing story out of it. But we're talking about content from his first book that isn't necessarily as well written as some of the other ones. And don't get me wrong, it's a great book. I'll be honest, I had a really hard time slogging through The Eye of the World. My friend kept telling me to read it. Finally, I did. Took me about a month. And then the second book took me about a week, and then after that I was reading a book or two a day. So it did start off kind of slow, and I think a couple of the alterations that they've made to the show here will kind of alleviate that for some of the viewers who are just coming into this and are going to be confused down the road when Perrin all of a sudden starts talking to wolves. So the next thing I wanted to touch on was, again, you have Perrin. Perrin's changes are some of the biggest changes so far to the beginning of the story. This is Perrin's wife. That's right. If you haven't seen the show, you heard me right. This is Perrin's wife. Perrin doesn't have a family in this story. He has a wife. And I'm not going to spoil for you exactly what happens, but tragedy befalls both of them, and it really, really makes a lot of sense for Perrin's story arc, because notoriously, in the story, Matt is constantly trying to go home. He wants to get home to his sisters. They play that up a lot in the TV show, his bond with his sisters, which I really, really like, because it's touched on in the books, but not as shown as in-depth, but it fleshes out his character as well. But the incident that happens makes Perrin want to leave and never return to the Two Rivers, and you can see that after he leaves, some stuff goes down. They end up at Eridol, and they end up split up just like in the books. We'll talk about that more in the next episode. Basically, he says, no, we need to go on to the White Tower because Egwene's trying to talk him into going home. And he decides that, I don't want to go home. We need to go to the White Tower. He's trying to avoid going home because he has some really, really bad memories of what just happened there. Also, it explains a lot of his passion for blacksmithing, because his wife in this is a blacksmith and they work the forge together. It doesn't say anything about Master Luwin or his apprenticeship or anything like that, So it's a lot more centered around his family life with his initial first wife. And the reason they were able to do this is because, remember, they made these characters about 4 to 6 years older each, depending on which character it is, which allows him to be married already. Now, the fact that this tragedy happens and tends to drive him away from his home is even more tragic, and compounded by the fact that he is the one who ends up going home. The rest of these folks don't see the Two Rivers for quite some time. Perrin ends up going back there and kind of taking care of it and becoming the Lord of the Two Rivers. So, I warned you about spoilers. I warned you. Remains to be seen what exactly is going to happen in this show. I will tell you, the biggest fear that I have for the Wheel of Time right now is that they are going to change the Dragon Reborn from Rand to somebody else. It would be a stupid decision, be a very, very bad decision, because if you do that, you pretty much make Rand useless and superfluous. If he's not the Dragon Reborn, he is no character at all and really doesn't matter. A lot of people are asking after the last episode if a certain character who burst and showed their power is the Dragon Reborn, and they're really not even close. That also was really, really true to her. We'll talk about that when we get to the episode 4 video. But so far, like I said, my biggest concern is them trying to allude to the people that haven't seen it. If you haven't read the book, they're trying to say, at first they say, oh, the 4 people, any one of them could be the Dragon Reborn. And then they say the 5 people, any one of them could be the Dragon Reborn. And if you've read the book, you know who the dragon is. I am very, very pleased with the next couple episodes. This episode was done really, really well. You can see here, I will put up a picture of the Trollocs, which if you see the Trollocs, if you're a Wheel of Time fan, this is the biggest fear that any of us had, next to the actual weaves themselves, for being shown visually on the screen. The Trollocs could have been done horribly, and they would have ruined the whole show. However, I think they pretty much nailed these guys, and there are some really, really vividly gross scenes. Each one is pretty much different. It doesn't look like they mass-produced them, which is great because the Trollocs all have different features. Some have hoofs, some have feet, some have beaks, some have snouts. Very, very, very good. There was one small scene in the episode where they leave the Two Rivers where you see a bunch of Trollocs chasing them across a shallow stream, and the CGI on it was a little bit wonky on the water effects. It was literally maybe a 10-second scene, if that, and if you're not looking for the bad visual effect, you really won't see it. For the most part, the visuals in here are clean and very, very nice, and maybe I just noticed that part because it just happened to stick out in my mind at the time. Something to do with the reflection and the splashes of the water. It just didn't quite look right. It's a very, very small scene and easy to forgive, easy to pass. The other thing that people worry a lot about, we got a good view of here in the very first episode. Now, they did use quite a bit of special effects in this first episode, so don't expect as much over the next couple of episodes, and then in the 4th episode you see quite another large explosion of visual effects. So they're doing a good job of balancing their visual effects budget and using it to represent the One Power when they need to. And so far, the One Power has been represented by both white and, in some cases, black weaves. You don't see any black weaves in the very first scene. You really only see them in the 4th episode, and we'll talk about that more when we get there. But I can tell you now that the white is a symbol of the pure One Power used by the female users of the One Power. So when you're seeing the white, generally it is the women. When you're seeing the black, generally it is the men, and I'm believing at the time, at the moment, I could be wrong, I believe it's showing up as black because it is still tainted, not because it is the male half. Curious to see what other people see, because only certain people can see the weaves. So I wonder if there's going to be times when it goes into other people's perspectives and shows the weaves in full color, or things like that. The very interesting thing is, from our perspective, we could see the male and the female force clashing with each other, the black and the white weaves, and very, very well done. Some people complain about the stringy, wispy magic effect. There's really no better way, in my opinion, to pull this off. I think it's done really, really well. It shows the interaction between the user and the object that they're manipulating. And you'll see a lot of times Moiraine using hand signals and stuff like that that aren't necessarily needed. We'll talk about hand signals a little bit more in the next video, because well, you know, some of those tricks come in handy. So that's going to be it for this episode of What the Hell, guys. I think we pretty much covered all of the things I thought were a little bit odd, but most of the changes I think are for the good. Also, Paddon Fane, very, very well chosen actor. His smile is malicious, and I'm curious to see the transition of his character from a normal, upstanding person to a really, really beaten down, bedraggled lackey of the Dark One. So, alright, so real quickly before I wrap this video up, I want to touch on two things. The first thing is the dragon's fang. Now, you see the symbol in the first episode in a pile of sheep carcasses supposedly laid there by the Trollocs, and that's how Lan knows that they're being followed and that they're close by. I have a slight problem with this simply because Trollocs are known not to waste meat, and if there was something to eat, they would have devoured it entirely. However, this is a very good piece of visual storytelling that is going to link all of these episodes together. I did not see one at first glance in the second episode, but I can tell you there is a dragon's fang in the third episode, and I would be willing to bet that this symbol shows up somewhere at least once in every episode. So keep your eyes out for it. If you saw it in episode 2, let me know in the comments down below where it's at, and the same with episode 4. But I know that it's in 1 and 3, and I'm going to do a little scouring and see if I can find it in the other episodes, because I think that it's going to be there, and I think it'd be kind of cool to do a compilation of all the appearances of the Dragon's Fang and the Tear of Tar-Valon. The other thing I wanted to touch on real quick before we leave is Matrim Cauthon. By far my favorite character by the end of the books, but I hated him for the first 3 or 4 books. The TV show is doing a great job of alleviating that and making you relate to his character by developing the plot line between him and his sisters, and his relationship with children is actually very troubled. He is childlike himself in his mentality and his actions a lot of the time, and just kind of wants to live a carefree life, but he feels for children in bad situations, and he doesn't like to see anybody hurt. And at one point he actually eventually adopts a child, not on purpose. The kid just kind of starts following him, and they become fast friends, and he becomes like a father figure to this kid. And it helps him in his development because in order to nurture and raise this child, he has to be the grown-up in the situation. So it really helps him grow up, and at the same time flushes out his character. But I think this hinting at his relationship with his sister kind of dives deeper into that and shows you he is very, very, very much a people person and wants to help kids and take care of kids. Even though he's kind of irresponsible himself, he's put himself on the back burner in order to take care of his sisters, and has become a lot like his father, which he despises. Very, very interesting character dynamic, and I'm curious to see how they let that play out. But I think the foreshadowing of his relationship with kids and being a caretaker in the first episode is really going to go a long way down the road when he runs into Oliver, and it'll explain a lot. So very, very well done. I do want to say that I had said some things about being worried about them replacing Matt Cauthon, but one thing I hadn't taken into account is the fact that when he takes that dagger and they take him to Tar-Valon, when they remove the dagger and they unbind him, he goes through a very, very serious physical change as well as a mental and emotional one. So technically, when he comes out of the tower, he's not the same person as the person that went in, and he's definitely not the same person as the person who left the Two Rivers. So I think that they could use this in some way to their advantage to manage to say that maybe the dagger had an effect on his appearance as well, and separating them changed him in a physical way to explain away the difference between the two actors. So this is something that they'll have to be thinking of ahead of time, and it would already have to be kind of insinuated before the end of this season. So I really, really hope that since they were given enough time and notice that this character wouldn't be playing Madigan in the second season, that they found a way to utilize this as a transition point between actors in order to make it seem seamless, because I think that it can be really well done that way and not drive anybody away at all. So let's get to the end of this video. I appreciate you sticking around, guys. We are going to see you in the next one, guys. We'll go over episode 2 in the next episode of What the Hell. And make sure you stay tuned for What Just Happened, where we go over what happened in the previous episodes before watching the next episode. So if you're getting ready to watch episode 2, watch What Just Happened episode 1 now, and then watch episode 2. And then after you're done, that's when you watch What the Hell for episode 2. So there's 2 different series here, very, very similar, but also not. That's going to be it, guys. Technivorous out. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, leave me a like, and smash that notification button to get notified when we put up more Wheel of Time videos. And we will see you in the next one.